Thank you, Broadcasting. Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Senate Committee on Government Affairs. Thanks to everyone who's joining us online. We appreciate your participation. Members, please remember to mute your microphone when you're not speaking. And will the Secretary please call the roll?
Vice Chair Orenshaw.
Here.
Senator Gokachia.
Here.
Senator Neal.
Here.
Senator Hansen.
Here.
Chair Don Daraloup.
Here. Thank you very much. We have all members present, so we have a quorum. And first, before I begin, I'll just remind the public that even in this virtual environment, we have several ways for the public to engage with the committee. And you can go on Nellis and find those multiple ways to submit written testimony or log into opinion polls and view meetings online. So please, if you have any problems, let us know, and we're happy to help you. When we get ready to do public comment, or you are supporting or opposing or neutral on a bill, remember when you're on the phone line to please pay attention, because Broadcasting will let you know the keys to push to unmute yourself so that you can present your testimony. Today we'll be hearing two bills. We have Senate Bill 138 and Senate Bill 180, and we're going to start with Senate Bill 138. And so this measure revises provisions relating to planned developments. And Senator Lang, I call you forward with your team from the city of Henderson, and please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Don Daraloup and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Roberta Lang, representing Senate District 7 in Clark County. Thank you for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 138, a bill that seeks to allow cities and counties to create a more streamlined process for making minor modifications to planned unit developments, more commonly known as PUDs. We have some amendments that were given to you. We're still having conversations. We wanted to let you know, Chair, that there may be some minor changes after the presentation today. I've been working with the city of Henderson on SB 138, and several staff members from the city are joining me today to help present the bill and answer any questions that you may have about my legislation. The city of Henderson, which includes parts of Senate District 7, has approximately 2,000 PUDs of various sizes and ages. Many of these are decades old, and many have undergone significant changes since they were first created, including ownership. This is not unusual. Cities and counties throughout Nevada encounter requests for changes to be made to these PUDs all the time. My bill would give the needed flexibility to cities and counties when it comes to approving minor modifications, and will help to modernize a section of NRS that is nearly 50 years old. Let me give you a very easy example that I use when I talk about minor modifications. This is not a process that you use if you are someone who is going to be building a new restaurant in a PUD. It is what you use when you already have the restaurant open and you want to make small changes to the building. I feel it is also important to point out what my bill does not do. SB 138 does not create a new ability to seek minor modifications to PUDs. It simply streamlines the process for a minor modification to be approved. And because SB 138 is permissive, it does not require the adoption of any new ordinance if a city or a county does not want to change what they currently handle in their PUD process. Since the bill's introduction, we have reached out to stakeholders and appreciate the time they have taken to provide valuable feedback on this proposed legislation. The conceptual amendment that I have submitted to the committee reflects that stakeholder input. It is now my pleasure to introduce Michael Taffy, the City of Henderson's Community Development and Services Director. Following his presentation, City of Henderson Government Affairs Manager David Cherry will walk you through each section of the conceptual amendment to SB 138. Thank you again for allowing me to join you today.
Thank you, Senator Lang. Thank you, Chair Don Loop, and members of the committee for having us today. My name is Michael Tassi. I am the Director of Community Development and Services for the City of Henderson. Over the next few slides, I intend to provide an overview of the issues we have had experienced in Henderson and our proposed solution. As was mentioned, we have had numerous older PUDs within the city and have encountered some issues during minor amendments to those PUDs, exclusively the non-residential variety. As we considered an NRS amendment, it occurred to us that the statute was written almost 50 years ago, and development codes have come a long way since then, as it is not uncommon to update development codes every 10 years. Our proposal was to enable jurisdiction to adopt ordinances to streamline the minor modification processes for non-residential PUDs and update minor procedural steps for initial approval. Next slide, please. Our intent with this proposal is to modernize the statute, to make some provisions that allow but not require local adoption of all its procedural requirements, and ensure transparency and public participation in the process, since enacting local ordinance requires a public hearing. Overall, our intent is to streamline the process. Minor amendments or any decisions that are made at the administrative level remain appealable to Planning Commission and City Council per NRS. NRS 278A currently describes a two-step tentative final approval process. While many jurisdictions adopt PUDs as ordinance, and the tentative aspect is part of the mapping process described in 278, this bill would make the tentative approval step optional. Regarding minor modifications to approved PUDs, we see many benefits to streamlining, including saving time, saving money, expediting reinvestment or investment in properties, and a process that would align more closely with a non-PUD development modification process, thus leveling the playing field. For example, Henderson's design review process for site design, architecture, and landscaping is administrative in nature, assuming a proposal for a minor modification complies with the development code. I will expand on this later. We are also experiencing an emerging issue with older non-residential PUDs with vacant big box retailers. Many of these require some adaptive reuse to reactivate the center, and this bill could facilitate a quicker process. For example, we have a vacant Sears building in a PUD that a new user may desire to add architecture to reflect their corporate image, or they may not need two primary entries anymore. This bill would allow those changes to be reviewed administratively. The type of minor modifications the city would like to see with a more administrative process are architectural style, architectural features, colors and materials, or development code compliant changes in building size, location, or site layout. A minor modification would not include a change in use that is not already allowed within the PUD, or anything where code would require a discretionary review by the local jurisdiction. For example, we have had questions of applicability of this proposed ordinance to taverns. If a tavern wanted to change their facade because of a new theme, they may be able to do so through a minor modification. However, in Henderson, for example, if a tavern were not already approved in the PUD, they would still need a conditional use permit, which is not a minor modification of the PUD. Regardless, any new tavern operator, whether for an existing location or not, would be required to obtain a City Council approved business license in Henderson. As I mentioned on a previous slide, the proposed change would help create procedural equity with like changes in non-PUD developments. The example here is an office building wanting to add an architectural feature. The proposed bill will allow cities and counties to clarify their ordinances that this change could be done administratively. I'll go to this next slide, and if Chris will toggle between the two, you'll see the differences here. This is this office building added a roll-up door, which you can see there, and the yellow that's circled. For one of their tenants. In a non-PUD, this is an administrative amendment to their design review and can be completed at staff level in about 30 days. In a PUD, this change could take up to 3 months and require both Planning Commission review and City Council approval, and it could cost time for the developer. This slide shows the opposing processes side by side. As you can see, the PUD process as described in NRS 278A takes 6 weeks longer than a non-PUD with a similar request to change. For clarity, our proposal would allow, not require, a jurisdiction to adopt an ordinance for minor modifications of PUDs that would mimic non-PUDs. Again, as amended, this proposal would only apply to non-residential PUDs. For the public process of appeal would still be available. Further, the public process of appeal would still be available as it is for other administrative processes. And as I turn this over to David to go over the bill language, I'd like to reiterate our purpose and intent. This proposal solidifies jurisdiction's ability to enact local PUD ordinances. It streamlines minor modification processes, modernizes an almost 50-year-old section of NRS, and allows jurisdictions to keep their current procedures. What this does not do, I also want to state for the record, it does not affect open space. It does not permit administrative minor modifications in residential PUDs, nor does it allow for major changes to a PUD like additional buildings or uses that are not already allowed within the PUD. Lastly, this bill does not intend to affect how taverns are approved or provide any avenues to bypass other code-required discretionary reviews. Thank you for your time, and I will turn this over to David Cherry.
Good afternoon, Chair Don Darrow-Loop and members of the committee. For the record, David Cherry, Government Manager of the City of Henderson. It's now my pleasure to walk you through the amendment section by section, starting with Section 1. Section 1, we remove the words without limitation. We add the words without limitation as language in the amendment, and this was added by LCB at their discretion. The bill also deletes the definition of provisions of the plan because this current definition is clear. In Section 2, subsection 2, this language makes clear the local governments have the authority to enact ordinances governing PUDs so long as they are consistent with NRS 278. In Section 3, we set out requirements for what must be contained in an ordinance addressing PUDs enacted by a county, and also requires that the modification provisions of the ordinance comply with the provisions of NRS 278-410, which I will address when we reach Section 13 of the bill. In Section 4, we are restoring language that was deleted in the original, and this is being done at the request of the stakeholder.
Mr. Cherry, I'm sorry to stop you, but you are cutting out in and out a little bit. So if you could, I don't know if you can move closer to your microphone, but we get a good sentence and then we don't get one that's so good.
Okay,
Thank you.
Chair. Yes, thank you for allowing me to continue, and I apologize. I hope that this is going to make the sound a little better for the committee. If I may start again then at Section 3 to make sure that that's captured for the record. In Section 3, we set out requirements for what must be contained in an ordinance addressing PUDs enacted by a city or county, and also require that the modification provisions of any ordinance comply with the provisions of NRS 278-410, which I will address when we reach Section 13 of the bill. In Section 4, we are restoring language that was deleted in the original bill, and this is being done at the request of a stakeholder. We have also added clarifying language regarding use of the tentative final mapping process that was discussed by my colleague, Mr. Tassi. This new language appears in green in subsection 4, Section 3. In Section 5, the section addresses issues regarding open space. We have restored all languages in this section of SB 138 to reflect what is currently in Section 120 of NRS 278A. This was done at the request of several stakeholders. I would also like to note, with the exception of changing must to the permissive may, all other changes in Section 5 of SB 138 as introduced were included by LCB. In Section 6, we are again restoring language in this section to reflect the current Section 130 of NRS 278A. And this is again being done by stakeholder request. Please note that there is one small bit of new language in this section that was added by LCB, which reads, to dedicate the common open space. Section 7 only contains a single strike through of the word work in Section 1 of 278A 220. This deletion was not a request made by the sponsor or the City of Henderson, but was made by LCB. In Section 8, the strike through language and additions in blue you see here have the effect of giving cities and counties the ability to modify the 5-acre minimum if done so by ordinance. Please note that under this current section of the existing statute, the right to waive this requirement already exists, but it does not specify it be done by ordinance. Section 9, we are allowing a city or county to modify an existing standard. in this case for number of parking spaces, if it is done so by ordinance. This is in keeping with the intent of the bill to allow jurisdictions greater flexibility. Section 10. The changes here in subsection 1 of section 10 are meant to reflect that the enforcement and modification of any PUD plan is subject to an ordinance adopted by a city or county and various sections of NRS 278A. In subsection 2 of section 10, we believe the current language in this section is extremely vague and hard to quantify due to its subjective wording. Therefore, we are proposing changes to this section to provide a clearer standard that must be met when it comes to protecting the public interest. Section 11 eliminates the changes proposed in this section of the original bill and restores NRS 278-390 to its current form. Section 12 restores existing language now in NRS 278-10. Section 13 establishes the ability for a city or county to create its own minor modification process with some specific exceptions that require any change to go through the existing public hearing process delineated in NRS 278-10. These exceptions include when a plan contains residential development or seeks to add residential development, or when a plan necessitates a vacation or abandonment of any street, public sidewalk, pedestrian right-of-way, or drainage easement. These would not be eligible for the streamlined minor modification process. Both these exceptions were added at the request of stakeholders. And I would again share with the committee that if adopted, SB 138 would still allow for these modifications to be granted, so long as the existing procedures now in law for review and approval were followed. In section 14, we make clear that if a county or city passes an ordinance laying out how a PUD is approved, then it does not need to include the tentative approval step. However, if the ordinance does include the use of both tentative and final approval requirements, then it must be done in accordance with the procedures now set forth in this chapter. Section 15 strikes the word tentative. Section 16, subsection 1, sets out certain requirements related to applications that must be followed under this chapter. Subsection 2 modifies an existing requirement to allow for an established fee to either be included in an ordinance or for it to be published and made publicly available by the city or county. I would ask the members of the committee to please note that this section is not authorizing the establishment of a new fee. And finally, subsection 3 strikes the word tentative in two places. Section 17 adds the word additional in subsection 10 and strikes the word final. Section 18 restores language regarding the tentative final approval process to make it clear we are preserving that options for cities and counties. Section 19 eliminates all changes in the original version of SB 138 and restores the existing NRS language. Section 20, in subsections 1 and 2, we eliminate changes and restore existing language from NRS. This change was made at the request of stakeholders. The new language being added in subsection 3 modifies existing language in NRS regarding conditions for revocation and makes this subsection permissive and subject to a city or county ordinance in keeping with the bill's overall intent. Section 21. Subsection 1 deletes reference to final to allow for flexibility and approval for earlier sections of the amendment. Subsection 3 restores current NRS language and makes a slight modification as reflected in the green language you see. This subsection deals with consent for modifications to uncompleted PUDs. The city's intent specific to this section would be to slightly revise statute so that a modification to a PUD that is not fully completed would require consent only from those landowners in the PUD affected by the modification. Current statute is unclear as to who landowner refers to in this context. This change would not affect whether a modification is eligible for an administrative approval or requires a public hearing. Simply, whose consent is required in order for the approval to be granted. This subsection also states this must be done in compliance with NRS 278-410, which is in section 13 of the amendment, and references the provisions I spoke about earlier specific to residential development and certain vacations and abandonment. Section 22 again deletes references to the final and finally for the reasons I previously stated. Section 23 adds back in existing NRS language on tentative and final as requested by stakeholders who use this two-step process and to clarify that judicial review is available for denial or approval at either stage. The original Section 24 that was contained in the bill as introduced would have repealed various sections of SB 138. These are being restored at the request of the stakeholders to ensure the bill preserves the ability for cities and counties to retain their current process for approving and modifying PUDs. So we are striking through all of those elements that we had originally requested be removed from the bill, and they are all being restored to reflect what is in NRS now. Finally, we have a new Section 24, and that will be the effective date for the bill if enacted. Thank you for allowing me the time to present this section by section.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else that you need to bring forward, Senator Lang? You're muted. There we go.
Yeah. No, Chair, we are happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
Okay, thank you very much. Committee, any questions from you?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Senator Neal, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I had a question on Section 2, and this is in the original and the amendment. So in Section 2, where you're saying this deals with the jurisdiction, I guess I'm wondering why the need for expansion, but my larger question is you drag in Chapter 278, which to me that's a catch-all. So what are we doing by inserting that chapter in there of 278? Because that is different. It's not 278A.
Thank you for that question, Senator Neal. And if I may please request that my colleague Amanda Kern, who is a city attorney 3 with the city of Henderson, I'd like to ask her to please answer the senator's question for us, if you would, Amanda. Thank you.
Hi, this is Amanda Kern, Assistant City Attorney, City of Henderson. First, I guess I would just point out that language was modified a bit by LCB, so I can't completely speak to what the intent on that end was. But I think from our perspective, we just wanted to make clear that if there's something that's not specifically addressed in 278A, but generally within the authority of cities to adopt an ordinance, if it's authorized under 278, it's okay. That's basically the intention of that provision.
Sorry, Madam Chair, but that wasn't authority you guys had before, correct?
Not authority that we have under the existing statute.
Yes.
I think that we did, but it was just basically trying to expand on that and make that clear that the general zoning authority within 278 would be applicable as well.
Okay. Madam Chair, can I ask one more question on a different section?
Please go ahead.
So on Section 13, in the amendment, I can't give you a line, but it's the language that says that the modification, removal, or release can happen without a public hearing, and then it provides those exceptions. I guess what I'm trying to understand is what is actually considered substantial compliance that would then lead you to the space where no public hearing is required. Can you put circumstances and instances that would clarify when a public hearing is not appropriate?
Thank you for that question, Senator Neal. If I may ask Michael Tassi, our Director of Community Development, or a member of his planning team that's present with us in our City Hall, would you mind taking the question, one of your team members?
Thank you, Senator Neal. This is Michael Tassi. Thank you, Senator Neal, for your question through the Chair, Don Loop. We were hesitant to provide an exhaustive list of administrative changes. The idea was that they would give the jurisdictions the ability to define what that was. Our intent here is for architectural changes, for increases to building size that already comply with code, for material changes, color changes to buildings, and that sort of thing. Currently, we don't have clear ability within the NRS to adopt or to do that through a minor modification process. It requires both Planning Commission and City Council approval.
Okay. Just a quick clarifying question, because what I'm trying to understand is, and I know you guys said LCB put it in, there's a lot of without limitation. And so when I see, and I know what you're saying your intent is, but 13 ties into section 3, right?
Thank you for that question, Senator. Amanda or Michael, would you be able to answer that question for the Senator as it relates to the two sections working in conjunction with one another?
Just clarifying the
And let me help clarify this. All right, so if you look at section 1 where you say what a plan can include, the original language in 278A 0.060 had a very finite group of things. LCB inserted without limitation. You guys were okay with that, but without limitation dragged in several other categories or things that could then be in the plan. Then you have your ordinance provision in section 3, which allows you to set forth the provisions around the application for the plan, which must include without limitation the procedures. And so I guess I'm just trying to understand the expansion, because there is an expansion, and what that then is the real life, I guess, examples that we're encountering. I get what your intent is, but the question is, how can it be used if your intent is not followed?
If the intent is not followed.
Meaning, like, okay, so everybody says my intent is to do something, but the power that is given by the sentence can actually be greater than that.
This is Michael Tassi to Senator Neal through the chair. I think I believe I understand your question and how this could be manipulated in a way that might not be our intent. And somebody would take something that is not a minor modification and use this state law to push something through that we weren't intending. The idea is, and I believe it's in the language, is to give the cities the ability to adopt the ordinance to establish what that is. And then on top of that, still preserve, and actually I believe we state that the appeal ability of NRS 278 still exists. And so if our interpretation of what minor isn't agreed with by fellow landowners within the PUD, they have the opportunity to appeal that decision. And the city also has the opportunity to deny that minor modification of a PUD if we don't agree that it meets that intent.
Okay, thank you for that. I won't hog any more time, Chair.
My pleasure to have you ask questions. I have questions on the same area. Other questions from the committee? Vice Chair Orangel, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senator Lang, for presenting the bill. A couple of quick questions. I'm looking at the amended copy, the amendment proposed by City of Henderson, and on page 2 at the bottom, there's the green language and then the red language, and it starts with, if the ordinance requires both tentative and final approval of the plan, reservation must, as far as practicable, defer the precise location of the common open space until an application for final approval is filed, and it goes on. Would that deferral of the location of the common space change the square feet or the acreage of the common space, or would that not change if this passes? That's my first question, and then I have a question on page 3, if the chair will indulge me.
Vice Chair Michael Tassi through the chair. The orange or red underlined language is actually language that exists in 278A now. we have added that language back into to the bill.
Okay, thank you very much. And then if I can turn to page 3, the deletion there at section 5 sub 2 of NRS 278A.120, the deletion of if the ordinance includes provisions to set aside common open space. And then I wonder if you could just, I guess maybe I'm a little confused about what's being deleted, what's being returned. Could you just explain what the intent is on that part of section 5 at the top of page 3 of the conceptual amendment?
Senator Ornschall, if I may, thank you for taking the time to meet with us in advance of today's hearing as well. We really appreciated your time. And I just wanted to say that we tried to use the color scheme that LPB sets out when it creates amendments. So when you see language that's struck through in purple, that represents the language that's being taken out. And then the orange language represents language that's being put back in from the existing NRS. So when you see this, the may, for instance, in sub 1 there that we strike, that was language we'd originally put in SB 138 as introduced. We've now struck that language and returned it to the original configuration that's currently in our must. That struck ordinance sub 2, which reads if the ordinance includes provisions to set aside common open space, has been struck. We've removed it then in the amendment from the bill, and now the amendment would restore must include, which is the existing language here in section 5. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, I think that does. Thank you, Mr. Cherry. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Additional questions? Senator Gokachia, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's a little more broad-based, just looking at the whole of the bill. And the intent clearly is to allow then by ordinance to modify a PUD with some minor changes. But I don't see anything in here. Is there anything that triggers when you would in fact have to go back, maybe because of a public outcry, or all right, you changed it from pink to yellow and all of a sudden you had a huge outcry on this building, public outcry. Is there anything that would trigger back to a public hearing?
Yeah, well, it's also the default.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Gokachia, and we appreciate you taking the time as well to meet with us in advance of today's bill hearing. If I may ask Mr. Tassio, a member of our planning staff, and I just would like to introduce, we have both Greg Toth, who is our principal planner, and Mr. Eddie Dichter, who is our planning manager from the city, available to answer questions as well. So any of the gentlemen in the room, or Amanda, of course, our city attorney, if you'd like to take that question, I defer to you. Thank you.
Amanda Kern, Assistant City Attorney, for the record. NRS 278-3195 requires that an appeal be granted for administrative decisions, an appeal by an aggrieved party. So if you are an aggrieved party, you'd be able to appeal that decision. And then that would go to a public hearing before the Planning Commission, and then that would be appealable to the City Council.
Thank you so much for that clarification. So no matter what you do, even if it is minor in nature, you still have an appealable right, and it would go to a public hearing. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Additional questions from the committee? I'd like to ask a couple, and then committee, feel free to jump in. One of the questions I have is on page 5 in section 13.3. It says is minor in nature and substantially complies with the approval plan. So who gets to decide what's minor, and who gets to decide what substantially complies with is?
Thank you, Chair, for that question. And again, thank you as well for meeting with us in advance of today's bill hearing. We really appreciate the time today and in advance of the hearing. I'm going to refer back to Mr. Tassi or his planning team or Ms. Kern in our City Hall if they wouldn't mind answering that question for the Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Michael Tassi. The idea behind the bill is allow the cities and counties to adopt the ordinance so that they can make the decision if something is minor in nature or substantially complies. And I believe the substantially complies language is already in the NRS. It's the minor in nature that has been added as we talked with some of our stakeholders.
Thank you. And the other question I have is, and a couple of these are questions that I asked when we spoke, One would be, I understand the city of Henderson is bringing this bill forward. Are there other cities that want this? Or I'm sure we'll hear from support, but where is the start of this bill? What was done or what was happening that we needed this bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. David Cherry for the record, City of Henderson. I'm going to again refer to Mr. Tassi. He and the planning department really were the genesis of this bill that was taken then to Senator Lang, who was kind enough to sponsor the bill at our request. But Mr. Tassi, if you don't mind kind of sharing a little bit more about the intent and really how you came to decide that this was a change that would be beneficial to the City of Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Michael Tassi, City of Henderson for the record. We have several examples of how the current language in 278A has impacted our ability to amend a PUD through a normal process. I'll use a simple example of a car wash that was built 20 years ago. And the car wash was of a certain size, established through a PUD, and the owner wanted to update and modernize that car wash and therefore expand it. And so his increase was greater than 10% of the size of that existing car wash. The height, the setback, the size still complied with our development code and would have been approved in normal course in a non-PUD just through a regular administrative process. However, because this was a PUD, they required this landowner, this property owner, to go through a full public hearing process that, and just for the record, elicited no public comment either at Planning Commission or City Council. That is just one example. We do have several very similar examples where it comes to these sorts of minor amendments. And the fact that 278A lacks the clarity to give local jurisdictions the ability to make those decisions administratively.
Thank you for that. So with that being said, then, if this is something that affects the city of Henderson specifically, or you feel a need to change it, why is it that we need to have the legislature change this? Why don't we just specify the city of Henderson or cities of that size with population caps on one side or the other, or geographic locations? Why don't we put our arms around who wants it rather than requiring the entire state to make those decisions?
Thank you, Chair. David Cherry for the record, City of Henderson. We appreciate you sharing that comment with us, and we certainly, if it would be the pleasure of the chair to entertain a change of that nature, we would certainly be happy to have a discussion about that. We felt, I think, upon approaching this, that because we are looking at a statute that does affect all cities and counties in terms of those who have PUDs, we felt as though the change would be something that could be beneficial to anyone who chose to want to do it. We felt because it was permissive to begin with, that if folks enjoyed the procedure they now had in place, they could continue to use it. Our goal was to create a second lane. We wanted to leave the existing lane in place. It's now in NRS for somebody to use when it comes to making a minor modification in a PUD. And then also create a second lane that those who wanted to do so through a new ordinance would take advantage of that to simplify the procedure. I think if you refer back to one of the slides that Mr. Tassi had there, you may remember that there was a much more cumbersome process with minor modification in a PUD that didn't take place. It took place in a PUD as compared to one that took place outside of the PUD. And so we really looked at that and thought, if we are experiencing that, many other cities and counties around the state must also be experiencing that. But again, go back to where I started. If it is the chair's wish that we look at putting a population cap in this bill, and of course at the discretion of the sponsor, I don't wish to speak for Senator Lang here, but we would have any conversation that Senator Lang would allow us to participate in with the direction of the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cherry. And I think we all got what you said, but you are breaking up just a little bit as an FYI. I believe Senator Neal has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the follow-up. So I have a question on Section 10. So you guys mentioned that a homeowner would have appeal rights, but in section 10 sub 2, the strikeout says that it used to say that the plan must be to further the mutual interest of the residents and the owners of the PUD and of the public preservation of the integrity of the plan. So with this strikeout, what would a resident challenge under? There's no longer a mutual interest. So what would they challenge under?
Thank you, Senator Neal, for that question. I'm going to ask Mr. Tassi or a member of his team to please answer that question on your behalf.
Senator Neal, Michael Tassi for the record. Thank you for the question through the chair. A resident can establish aggrieved party status on any administrative approval here in the city of Henderson. And I don't want to make any assumptions for other jurisdictions. That resident can write a letter in opposition of any change that is made to that PUD that they feel has affected them, and then establish that aggrieved party status, and then therefore appeal the application.
Oh, thank you for that, because then that leads me to the next part, which is the same, a second part to that question. In section 14 sub 2, the way I read this language where it says that the ordinance requires both tentative and final approval, it sounds like it's simultaneous. So I had a question about the timing associated with the approval, being that tentative and final seemed like it could happen simultaneously, and when the opportunity would exist for a resident to grieve a process that has become final, at tentative and final at the same time. And you tell me, if sub 2 is not simultaneous, then tell me how I should read the timing of the provision.
Thank you, Senator Neal. David Cherry, City of Henderson. I'm going to again ask Mr. Tassi or one of his team members or Ms. Kern from our city attorney's office to please answer your question.
Thank you, Senator Neal. This is Greg Toth with City of Henderson. If there's a tentative and final approval process, the first part of that, the tentative process, has a public hearing included in it, and the final approval process does not. It would be approving a tentative map and then following it up by recording a final map. Recording a final map is an administrative procedure. If a jurisdiction uses a one-step approval process, it's as though you're granting the tentative map, the tentative approval and final approval at the same time, like you said. That's where the public hearing is. There's still the public hearing, and this is for creating a new plan unit development. There is still planning commission and city council public hearings at both, and that is when the public would be able to speak and grieve.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Additional questions from the committee? Vice Chair Earnshaw, anything?
Not currently. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. All right. Well, seeing no more questions or from the committee, I guess I will ask Senator Lang, any follow-up from you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just close by saying I think this bill gives the needed flexibilities to the cities in the county when it comes to approving minor modifications, and it will help modernize the section of the NRS that's 50 years old. And I think it will be a more streamlined process that will be better for everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. So we will now go to support, opposition, and neutral. As a reminder that all testifiers have 2 minutes, and you are welcome to submit more comprehensive testimony in writing. So broadcasting, is there anyone on the line who would like to testify in support?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support of SB 138, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 781, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Nick Vanderpool, NICK-VANDERPOEL, with Capital Partners, today representing the City of Fernley. Today, the City of Fernley is in support of Senate Bill 138. Late last night, while I was trying to figure out consolidated tax, Mr. Cherry shared the proposed amendment for SB 138, in which the city's planning department had the opportunity to review earlier today. As a growing community in Northern Nevada, we had early concerns about its impact to the city and our ability to modify the existing plan development ordinance. We are satisfied with the proposed amendment language because it will not require a complete overhaul of the current ordinance. So thank you to the City of Henderson, and we appreciate working with them on this bill. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee.
Thank you. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 184, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Danero Loop. This is Matt Walker, MATTWALKER, speaking on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association in support of Senate Bill 138. Obviously, the committee can tell that there's been a significant amount of work that has gone into this bill and a lot of communication and outreach. And although the amendment that's presented before the committee today significantly limits the application of this bill to residential communities, we still think that there's great value in additional efficiencies that are going to help speed product to market and open up additional public meeting spots for residential communities to get started and bring down the cost of ultimately of getting to market. PUDs are a great value for local governments and the development community for facilitating infill development and allowing for unique solutions that can buffer or transition when a parcel is surrounded by different zoning types. This is a common sense bill that really captures, obviously not everything that we hoped would be included in the administrative process, but certainly the 80% where we can all agree that it's probably appropriate for an administrative process. And so, again, just want to express our support and appreciation for Senator Lang and all her hard work on this bill and really urge the committee to consider its passage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next caller, please.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 874, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, for the record, Callie Wilsey with the City of Reno. My name is CALLIWIL, S as in Sam, EY. We are here in support of SB 138 today. We appreciate the bill sponsors for bringing this forward and for the City of Henderson working with us on the effort in this bill. We know there were a lot of stakeholders involved, and we appreciate the proactive outreach in advance of the hearing. We appreciate the flexibility this bill provides in allowing local jurisdictions to make our processes more efficient, while at the same time maintaining the major key components of the original PUD and protecting those community expectations. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today.
We are currently in support of SB 138. To testify in support, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 718, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 718, please press star 6 now to unmute yourself. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you, Chair Loop and Vice Chair Orenshaw, for allowing my statement of support. My name is Wesley Harper, WESLEYHARPER. I am the Executive Director of the Nevada League of Cities and Municipalities. The League is in support of SB 138, and we appreciate the work of the sponsor to bring this bill forward and the distinguished members of the Senate and Government Affairs Committee for hearing it. This bill is a thoughtful and permissive adjustment to existing law. Henderson and other Nevada jurisdictions have many existing and old plan unit developments that are often amended with relatively minor changes, but the current statute can make the process burdensome, both for the applicants and municipal planning departments. Under SB 138, each jurisdiction would be empowered to set their own standards for amending PUDs, but basic requirements are left intact. If approved, jurisdictions would be able to outline their own approval process through ordinance. It would not have statute outline the approval process, particularly for amendments to PUDs. Again, thank you very much, Madam Chair, for your attention and allowing my statement of support.
Caller with the last three digits of 938, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 938, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Senate Government Affairs Committee. For the record, my name is Ariel Edwards, ARIELLEEDWARDS, with the City of North Las Vegas, testifying in support of Senate Bill 138. We appreciate the bill sponsors for bringing this forward. We believe this bill modernizes antiquated NRS language and streamlines the process for minor modifications. This will provide the city with more flexibility and ownership with our own local ordinances in regards to PUDs, which we appreciate. We are aligned with the amendment language brought forth by the City of Henderson and want to thank them for their efforts on this bill. Thank you so much for your time.
If you recently joined us, we are in support of SB 138. To testify in support, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers left in support at this time.
Thank you very much. Can we move to opposition, please?
Thank you. To testify in opposition of SB 138, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits of 079, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 079, please press *6 now to unmute yourself. Thank you. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. This is Josh Hicks, HICKS, with McDonald Carano, testifying on behalf of the Builders Association of Northern Nevada. BAN is the advocacy organization for the home building industry in the northern part of the state. Testifying in opposition today, but I believe only in hopefully temporary opposition. We really only had one issue with the as introduced version of the bill, and that was the deletion of some landowner consent provisions in Section 21. The conceptual amendment that has been proposed by the City of Henderson restores that language, and with the restoration of that language, we would have no opposition to this bill. I wanted to thank Mr. Cherry and the City of Henderson for working with us to address our concerns, and we do hope that as this bill is processed, that amendment will be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, you have no more callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much. Then we will go to neutral, please.
To testify neutral on SB 138, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers that are neutral at this time.
Thank you very much. With that being said, we'll close that part of the testimony, but I do believe, Senator Neal, did you still have a question? I think I missed you as we went through the...
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do. So, Mr. Cherry, there's just something that I can't put my finger on in this bill. And so I heard the testimony that, and I saw the PowerPoint, which was like, okay, you have old malls. I'm wondering where the old malls are in Henderson. But is this trying to get at any other space? Like, back in, I think it was 2017, 2019, the Royal Links, the Badlands golf course. Is this at all related to what's going on over there with those issues?
Senator Neil David Cherry, for the record, City of Henderson. I do appreciate your question, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to that. First off, I just wanted to say that as we envisioned it, it does have a broad applicability. The areas that we're speaking of, I think Mr. Tassi used the example of Sears. I think we have some big box retailers. I think you'll find them in many locations around the valley, including in the City of Henderson, places like that had been where Toys R Us were located, Sears, Kmart, other types of retailers that have now gone out of business. We're looking at vacant space that we would like to see repurposed. As it relates to the question of golf courses, and I would invite Mr. Tassi or a member of his team to speak further to this, I do know that in the City of Henderson, we do not use PUDs for our golf course community. So in the case of the City of Henderson, it would not be applicable. That was not the reason that we brought the bill. I know that there may have been some questions that have been asked, perhaps of committee members. So we're happy to speak to that further. I would invite Mr. Tassi or any of the folks in our City Hall and in the City of Henderson there to add to my comments.
Thank you, Senator Neal. Michael Tassi again for the record. The short answer to your question is no. There is no intent for this to apply to golf courses. In fact, the residential or the removal of some of the residential provisions that were in NRS 278A as proposed have been removed, primarily for that purpose, so that there was typically golf courses are associated with residential, and these minor modifications wouldn't allow that. And as David had indicated, Mr. Cherry had indicated, the golf courses that we have here in the City of Henderson are either approved by development agreement or through a master plan, which is a different process than the plan year development. And I hope that answers your question, but I'm happy to expand if you need me to.
No, I appreciate you putting the intent because it is expansive, and there is a without limitation piece in there. So I just wanted to ask the question, put it out there because I was thinking it. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Neal. All right, I will now finally, if I think we're out of questions and we've done our testimony. So Senator Lang, do you have any closing remarks?
I have nothing else to add, but I just want to thank you, Chair Don Darrell-Loop, and the rest of the committee for hearing our bill and asking good questions so we can pass a good piece of legislation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you to the City of Henderson for joining us today. I will now close the hearing on Senate Bill 138, and I'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 180. This measure revises provisions relating to fire prevention. And I think we have Senator Sievers-Gansert and several others to present. Am I correct, Senator?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Senator Heidi Sievers-Gansert, representing Senate District 15 in Northern Nevada. And I am here to help present Senate Bill 180. With me, I have Dr. Graham Kent, who is Director of the Nevada Seismological Laboratory and Professor in the Department of Geological Services and Engineering at the University of Nevada, Reno. I also have Keith Lee, and then not presenting but available for questions is our State Forester Fire Warden, Casey. So again, I'm here to help present Senate Bill 180, which, as you mentioned, is about fire prevention and also about making sure that our State Forester Fire Warden is able to purchase or acquire cameras or other equipment necessary for early warning and detection of fires. And I want to tell you on a personal note, the reason I brought this to the legislature is that I was made aware of the alert wildfire system when I was at the University of Nevada, Reno. And we've had a number of fires here in Northern Nevada. And during those fires, I was able to log on, and anybody can log on. It's a public domain to see where fires are located, because they put eyes, basically sensors and cameras on top of mountaintops around Lake Tahoe Basin and the Reno area. They've also done it in other states, but we're pretty well covered. So when there's a fire that starts in our area, we know very, very quickly. And as someone who lives on the edge of the Toyabe National Forest, I can tell you I pulled it up a number of times to see which direction the wind is blowing, if my home is potentially threatened. And some of the fires we've had, like the Collin Ranch fire, we've had the fire in Little Valley and so forth, you can actually see the progress and what's happening because of the system. And so I brought this bill forward, and Dr. Graham Kent will be talking about this because it's just this incredible early warning system to help us minimize the damage of fires and potentially prevent them too when something may be starting. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Graham Kent, who can tell you about the Alert Wildfire System, which is what we want to help support by making it eligible, funds eligible to be spent on systems like he will be presenting. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, and welcome to Dr. Kent. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Chair Loop, and again, thank you, Senator Sievers-Gansert. And so hopefully I'll get this right. We tried it once, and let's see, there we go. So practice makes perfect, hopefully. Again, I want to thank you for inviting me to testify on Senate Bill 180. I'm here today as Vice President of Wildfire Live. I'll explain that to you in a moment. But a picture speaks 1,000 words. And this was a imagery from the Numbers fire this last summer. Many of you know about that fire. And this was a newly installed NV Energy camera. And we're thankful that NV Energy is now supporting this program. And this did a couple things. It was basically caught early on and allowed the firefighters, be it whether they're from the East Fork Fire, BLM, NDF, as Casey knows, and also potentially the Humboldt-Tiobe, but allowed them to size up the fire and respond appropriately. And this was a bit of a dicey situation because it was very explosive fire behavior, and there were homes and people. And the thing that you might not understand is that it also allowed folks at NV Energy to essentially look at this picture and understand how they're going to de-electrify the area in a way that wasn't with a sledgehammer, because you just don't want to, knock down power all the way to Carson City, right? So by having this situational awareness, they can do a much better job to keep the power on when they need to keep it on, and start shutting it down so people can get out safely. And so that was just one fire in many fires last year. Just to give you a little background, Alert Wildfire is a university consortium between Nevada, UC San Diego, and Oregon. And there's a little plus sign now because of our success and the sheer demand through the university. We were able to spin out a C Corp called Wildfire Live, and this is to help scale our operations literally around the West and around the world. As you will soon find out in Australia, you'll hear something in about a month. But it really started with one camera, thanks to fundraising from the Tahoe Prosperity Center. The first camera was in Nevada, and so that was appropriate upon Snow Valley Peak. And we also, with that NGO and the BLM Nevada and folks from the El Dorado and Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit, started Alert Tahoe. And it really started to take off. And by 2018, we had 85 cameras. And then, as you know, in 2017 and 18, it was pretty catastrophic in California. And we've been growing like gangbusters ever since. And now we have most of the major utilities in the West signed on, obviously BLM, Forest Service, CAL FIRE, NDF, and their equivalents in about 5-6 states right now. And we're up to about 769, not 768. We just put a camera up on the Sutro Tower in San Francisco, if you know that. And we'll be punching through the 1,000 camera mark here next summer. So between this consortium, why are fire services wanting to do this? And one of the things I always, when I talk to folks outside of California, or not California, that's the other 49 states, there's always a sense of like, wow, things are really bad in California, but we're not California. And that may be true in many ways, but it's not in fire behavior. And if we just look at the bottom of the screen, this was last October in Colorado. This was one of the 3 largest fires in the history of Colorado all last fall. And unfortunately, this wasn't one of our cameras, so the only person who saw this was the person taking the video. Oregon, as well as Washington, had catastrophic fires in September. In Oregon, they burned about 1 million acres in several weeks. Really record fires throughout the West. And the reason why we want to put out, as Senator Sievers-Ganser mentioned, is it's really the eyes on the fire. Or maybe think about it as the 21st century fire lookout, where we invite not only folks like the state forester, but also the public. And the first thing we want to do is reduce the response time to wildfires. We want to get on top of them fast because things are really explosive these days. We also want to be able to scale those resources up or down within seconds of confirmation and or discovery. You get one chance to knock that fire out. And if it takes another 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes, 60 minutes before you get eyes on the fire, you're not going to know whether you need to throw everything at it or back off. And so that whole size up or scale up is super important. Once that happens, you get to see fire behavior. And this is really critically important for firefighter safety. And in some explosive, unfortunate fires, it can save lives with timely evacuation. And for those of you who remember the tunnel fire in Oakland, what you might not know is that fire was put out until it blew back up. So you'll see our cameras parked on fires for several days after they're put out because we don't want to have it re-flare up and no one see it fast enough. So really these 5 things have led to really a different way that we respond to fires throughout the West. So what does it really look like? Here's just some amazing footage of 3 fire starts that were actually discovered and called into Sierra Front back in 2016, the Tule Rock and Seven Lakes fire. And one of the things that really allowed them to do is which one do you hit, right? So you see these three lightning strike fires, and the fire to the left is the Rock fire. And so when they sized up the fire and responded, they had to go there first because it was impinging on some homes for those folks that live in the wireland urban interface. And so there were no homes lost during that fire. And again, what does 20, 30 minutes buy you? It can buy you a lot. And again, we were able to watch this fire for many days, probably about a week and a half, in fact, mostly the Tule fires that burned towards Pyramid Lake. It also gives you asset protection. For those of you not familiar with Virginia Peak, that big golf ball on the tower is the FAA radar dome for the airport. So if you like to fly in and out of Reno, which most of us like to do, you don't want that destroyed or a lot of the infrastructure connecting to it. So this was a picture during the Perry fire, and this was, the camera was pointed by Paul Peterson, who's the BLM State Fire Management Officer, 4 seconds into a point, and they're basically doing asset protection on top of Virginia Peak, including the big golf ball up there. So we want to make sure that we can keep not only people and homes safe, but there's critical asset protection out there we need to take care of. So when the wheels go off the bus, like I don't think anyone's seen ever, it happened during this lightning siege in California. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But here's examples of the beginning of the August Complex fire, one of several fires that merged, became California's first gigafire. You don't want to know what that word is, but what it means is 1 million acres. Can we have a 1 million acre fire in Nevada? Yes, we can. We had the Martin fire that was a little over 400,000. So again, gigafires. The lightning strike below is part of the 5 or 6 fires that coalesced for the LNU complex fire. And we had all of those starts nailed. The big problem there is when you start 376 fires in 12 hours, you run out of planes, you run out of trucks, you run out of people. And now you're playing a different game. You're in triage mode. This is an example of our website, www.alertwildfire.org. And again, this is our crowdsourced 21st century lookout. And the whole public could see it the whole time, scaled up on AWS, just like Netflix for fire. This is a really bad evening in Napa because pretty much every camera there shows a fire. And so when you are, for example, CAL FIRE, how do you know who to evacuate when things literally, the wheels have come off the bus? And so our camera networks, unfortunately, in this situation, became this triage tool to figure out what to do for life safety. There's habitat protection, and things, for example, in Nevada can kind of get a little sideways if we start destroying a lot of sage-grouse habitat. And this is early on from Midas Peak. And before we had a big network, but we had one at Midas Peak at the time. And this is a hot pot fire. Think of burning 3 acres a second or over a football field every second. Looks more like a volcano. As a geologist and a seismologist, if someone showed me that 10 years ago, I would have thought it was an eruption. It was just a wildfire type. And again, we have to make sure that we keep habitat safe for the critters that live there and the plants, but we also have rangeland issues and mining issues that could be curtailed if we start having gigafires around Nevada, which we don't want, obviously. The next day, this was kind of a first, and folks not only in Nevada, but also up at the NIFC Center in Boise were watching the attack to save the town of Midas. And you can see a FOSS check there. And literally, it was like the fire management officers pulled up in a chariot looking over Midas and could direct the planes on the strikes and to save the town. So that's modern firefighting in many ways. So, okay, fire cameras cost money, firefighting costs money. So how do we offset that? And so here's an example in California where you might save a couple $2 billion and you did it twice in 2 years. This is the Lilac Fire, the day that will live in infamy in San Diego County. It was December 7th, 2017. I bring this up because sometimes you'll hear that under certain fire conditions, you cannot stop a fire, and that's usually the case. In this case, it was the worst fire conditions ever in San Diego history. San Diego County is home to the Cedar and Witch fires that burned well over 200,000 acres. A lot of lost lives and homes. And yet this day was worse. Here's a picture with a little circle around it of the first smoke plume about 35 seconds after the 911 call. This had Chief Meacham from CAL FIRE literally push out all 43 trucks in 3 minutes based on that intel. They never do that unless they had cameras throughout the county realizing that there were no other fire starts on this grim fire condition day. Then they had 4 cameras that allowed them to squeeze this fire down and decapitate it at 4,050 acres. After this happened at the University of Nevada, Reno, my phone was ringing off the hook because everyone was sure that this was going to be that $1 billion or $2 billion fire, but we got lucky by making our own luck. But you know, in the modern new normal, we get many chances, and here's a house fire ready to jump in the wooey. A couple of years later, and lo and behold, before the first fire trucks put it out, this SDG&E Sky Crane helicopter knocked the fire down based on early intel. If there's a proud moment in my career, it would be this day. The rest of it I could chuck. This was a Kincaid fire in 2019, started during one of 3 back-to-back-to-back Diablos. It was really a template fire for the Tubbs fire in the sense it was just a little bit to the north. Tubbs fire, there was no intel for 3 hours. Things were crazy. They lost 5,600 structures, 22 deaths. Look what happened with the Kincaid fire, 374 structures and 0 deaths. And that can be attributed in large part to having intel from 7 cameras from the moment of ignition. And that's what that scary night looks like. They evacuated 100,000 plus people off that mountainside. And again, not a single injury nor loss of life. And the loss of structure was very minimal for the size of the fire. And that's the new normal, or the new extreme, as we like to call it. There's nothing normal about it. So presently, we have 42 alert wildfire cameras in Nevada. We already have funding through BLM and NV Energy. We have 24 more fire cameras on the hook, and you can see that in the 2 boxes in the center and to the left. And then over the last several years, working with folks in Casey Casey's office and BLM Nevada, we went through the state and tried to figure out where are the holes in the network that potentially the state could help out, like is happening in California, where there's a little bit of everybody chipping in. And so we came out with a list of about 15 sites. And again, it would cost about $1.5 million over 2 years. And again, that's a lot of money, but remember, when you start buying planes and their costs are in the tens of thousands or 40, 50,000 an hour, and there's multiple planes, things start to get expensive very fast. Not surprisingly, well, maybe a little bit surprisingly, but a lot of the early action was located in the central and northwestern portion of Nevada. And so if we were to go back, and I won't, I'll spare you, but if you go back to that proposed list, we have many more sites in the southern part of Nevada. NV Energy is also helping out in that regard. We have sites like Mount Charleston that is very, has the potential of large loss of life. So we definitely want to not pretend like the only hazard in the state is in the center and the north. And also last year, the eastern side, the southeastern side of the state had very extreme fire behavior, and it's really setting up for another bad year in the southeast. And we have several BLM cameras going in there as well. So we'll have some hopefully for the beginning of that part of the fire season. And yellow are the potential new sites. So a little bit everywhere, but a little more focused to the south. Again, we just want to highlight, and I'll just do it briefly, but you know, this network's out there really trying to bend back the curve of these crazy fire conditions that we're seeing that seem to get worse every year. And Nevada is not California, but y'all can have fire conditions just like California. And places like to the north, Galena, down south, Mount Charleston, Spring Creek, out by Elko, you can have very catastrophic events under the right conditions and not rare conditions, I'll state. Again, other states like California are significantly investing, and Utah's coming on board, and Nevada's done a pretty good job, but we'd like to finish it off. So that's why we're here. And again, for a win for the university in commercialization is that we've been so successful that we have kind of had to go that route and work in tandem with the university. And you'll find out again more about some work that's going on in Australia. And here's the fun part of the cameras when things aren't burning up. People use this for life flight safety. So if you have a loved one that's getting, unfortunately, pulled off the side of the road in a helicopter or being transferred from hospital to hospital, the life flight folks are using our cameras all over the West to do that. National Weather Service loves our cameras for better prediction of weather. And sometimes it's just birds and albino elk. And people love birds. And as you see to the right, there's a California condor. And up to the left, if you look carefully, one of the elk is an albino elk up on Cave Mountain in eastern Nevada. So again, thank you for this time to highlight some successes and where we'd like to go next. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kent. And Madam Chair, the bill really is just has enabling language to allow our forester fire warden to purchase the type of equipment that has just been described. And as was mentioned by Dr. Kent, we have some needs, significant needs in southern Nevada and some in eastern Nevada. And I think western Nevada is pretty well covered right now. So this is really to look towards the entire state. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Sievers-Gansert. Questions from the committee?
Madam Chair.
Senator Neal, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I like the presentation. It was super interesting. It makes me want to go to Eastern Nevada. But so I'm wondering, I know it's enabling language, but I'm curious as to how it's going to be paid for. Was there disaster money that came down from the recent fires?
Thank you. For the record, Senator Heidi Sievers-Gansert. So this bill actually doesn't have any money in it, and I think our state forester fire warden can probably answer questions, but I believe that we get quite a bit of federal dollars. And when I used to sit on Ways and Means, I know we'd have these fires, and then we'd have money that would reimburse some of the costs of those fires. But I also think we get some money that is for we're adding prevention, but we have forest and watershed management. So the state forester fire warden, Casey, could probably answer that question best. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Senator Neal. Madam Chair, through you. Yeah, we don't, this particular one doesn't have any funding currently. However, we do have money through an NV Energy contract and our matching SB 508 funds through the state. We had put in some cameras into that, both contracts on the NV Energy side and SB 508. In addition, we a lot of our grant funding comes through the U.S. Forest Service, and we're always looking for ways to look for preventative methods for wildfire detection and other equipment that may be necessary to help. So we do have small amounts of funds. Obviously, I don't think we have $1.5 million sitting here right now, but we are always looking for that. So if the language is in the bill, then we can push that money out to these cameras quickly.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator. Additional questions? So, Vice Chair Orenshaw, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senator Sievers-Gansert, for presenting the bill. I think my question would go to either of the two witnesses. If this bill passed, would it also cover, non-fixed cameras? Would it cover technology like cameras in airplanes or drones or satellite technology trying to monitor for forest fires, or would it just be fixed cameras on towers?
This is Graham Kent for the record. I'll jump in. On my presentation right now, it's just fixed cameras on towers, but there's a whole ecosystem out there right now where we are already pulling from GOES 16, GOES 17 as a backstop for when we don't have a camera, or if everything kind of gets lost in something, someone's not calling in, it's not being detected. So these cameras plug into a lot of other things in the techno space that really allow you to address the question that it's more than just the cameras themselves. And so they play a critical part, but they're not the only part. And I'm sure the state forester would like me to say this. The cameras also play a very critical part on fuel reductions, being able to monitor prescribed burns. And so if you look this last year, there's a whole bevy throughout the West because of the conditions of a lot of really fuel reduction, which is great because that's another step in prevention. And the reason I bring that up is it also is training our AI algorithms. So the more fake fires we have, or at least prescribed fires, the more we can put AI on these cameras and get better and not always have to rely on 911. We can also kind of have that, the machines start to help us out. And we have pilot projects in doing that over in California right now. So thank you.
Madam Chair, if I can add.
Please go ahead.
For the record, Senator Heidi Severs-Gansert, and to answer your question, Vice Chair Orenshall, this language is broad and technology will evolve. So this language is broad enough to cover what's been described today, but beyond that, because it really is about the equipment necessary and cameras for early warning and detection. So I think the language is broad enough. So as technology changes, so can the use of the funds.
Thank you, Senator Severs-Gansert. Thank you, Dr. Kent. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Additional questions? Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Actually, the question that Vice Chair Orenshall just brought up kind of stimulated a thought. The advances in satellite technology, I'm almost wondering, as Senator Severs-Gansert pointed out, this is flexible. But I'm just kind of wondering, Dr. Kent, the changes in satellite technology in a weird way is going to make cameras like this almost archaic in the future. How far are we advanced on these satellites being able to do these kind of really quick early detection type things that we're currently relying on these land-based cameras?
Okay, thanks. I guess I'll make 2 points on that. One, the GO 1617 satellite pair is pretty sophisticated. And having said that, in the Southern California test bed this last year, the average detection time for the satellite is anywhere between about 15 and 45 minutes. The average 911 call is about 4 to 8 minutes in California. So the satellite only beat cameras, 911 plus cameras, only one fire all last summer. And then once you have that detection, whether it's from AI on a land-based camera or the satellite, then it's detected. And so what the reason why the land-based satellites aren't ever going to go away is you get this critical situational awareness where you can understand how the fuel's reacting to the fire, how the wind's setting up. You might have shear in two different levels. You'd never see that from the satellite. So, but with as bad as fire is today, it's kind of, everybody chips in every technology because it's just really bad. So hopefully that answered your question. And that was Graham Kent for the record.
It did answer my question. One follow-up, you mentioned fuels reduction, which seems to be something that we're kind of way behind the times on. I mean, having watched these fires, I remember the first million-acre fire just like yesterday in 1999 here in Nevada. And then we had in the 2000s a whole series of years where we burned over 1 million acres repeatedly in Nevada. And I know the BLM's working on that, but it's not part of the bill. But I just want to make sure we get a little plug in. We need to do some pretty dramatic reductions of fuels, whether it's livestock, logging, whatever. We've got to make some serious advances. What I'm scared to death of, honestly, is a paradise type fire. Wind conditions, everything raw, just right. Just wrong, I guess I should say, in the Lake Tahoe Basin. When you go and you look at those fires from the Paradise and you watch that treetop burning, crown burning across the whole thing like that, burn up that city, killing people. I mean, the possibilities for that in the Tahoe Basin just scares the heck out of me. But anyway, thank you for your presentation. I think it's a great bill. Sounds like we're on the right track. So all for it. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Additional questions? So I have a couple. One is, and I don't know whether Dr. Kent or Casey or who wants to answer this. How do you know how this shortens your response time? I mean, I know you know that, but give me a little bit of a, like instead of 5 hours response time, now it's 2 hours, or instead of 3 days, it's 1 day. Like, give me some perspective there so that I can understand. I've seen many of these pictures from the Smokey the Bear that is my brother, but I am just curious about some of the things that I hear from his voice as these years have gone by of fires.
Do you want me to take that, Graham, first?
Yeah, how about you do it first and I'll follow?
Okay, for the record, Casey. We use these cameras in our dispatch centers. So when that call goes into 911, our dispatch centers and many of our state FMOs, ourselves, the BLM, the Forest Service, can turn those cameras to make sure, or other cameras that may have a better view in. Our response time is shortened. Well, and it's not just the shortened response time, but it's also when we can see where it is. So one of the issues with 911 is many people, including myself, are directionally challenged and maybe don't know exactly where they are or what hilltop they're looking at. So that's always been a challenge for our dispatch centers to find exactly where that point of origin is. So we send things out and they don't necessarily land in the right spot. So this helps us to know once the call comes in, we can turn the camera. We know exactly where that fire is and what we should send. And then also to Graham's point earlier, when we're looking at the fire, we know what fuel type it's in, we know what the road access might be. So we may be, instead of sending ground crews, we might be sending helicopters because we know the access is difficult. So all of that is much more easily detected for us. So it's not just that in shorter duration of the response, but also a more efficient response in what we're sending to fight that fire.
That helps a lot. Thank you. Dr. Kent, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to throw some numbers that I know from this last year, because we all get to live that nightmare. Basically, I would say if things are just clicking quickly, you're going to probably save, on average, probably 20 to 30, 35 minutes in most responses. Kincaid Fire was 35 minutes based on what typically would happen is they're going to just, Casey and her folks are going to dispatch, right? And then typically that size up might have to wait till they get there. And so in many cases, old school, it's going to take a while to get there and make sure that the map challenged people, and you just make sure you know exactly what you're up against. And so pretty routinely, I would say, in California, which is really no different than anywhere else, I just happen to know the numbers because there's so many fires. It's cut in between about 20 to 35 minutes, but in extreme fire conditions, that's a lot of time.
Thank you very much. And then I guess the other question I have, and this is one of those that I think I know the answer to, but I'd like to hear it from you. We talk about structure fires and we talk about our forests or our wildlands burning, but I know that this also must help with lives, right? We heard that we lost a lot of lives in one fire when you did some statistics earlier in your presentation. But I also, like I said previously, worry about the firefighters. So could you talk a little bit about the firefighters and how this might help them in their safety and also in their fighting of the fire?
I could go, I guess, first. So again, for the record, Casey. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. It definitely can help, again, with when we're looking at what we're sending. There are oftentimes originally when we're sending folks out there, it's dangerous to have folks on the road. That's one of the most dangerous things we do every day is send them out in vehicles. And so this reduces that drive time. If we know exactly where the start is, it reduces the amount of people we might send if we know kind of the terrain and how it might move through that terrain. So we're a lot more able to send the right things to the right places, which, and early detection means we can get those out there for structure protection quickly. We're looking at that. Local government is using these cameras as well. They're really the first responders out there usually. And so they're looking at these as well to determine what structures are in the way of that fire. We can see how quickly it's moving by the fire cameras. So all of that is happening a lot quicker. Unfortunately, like Dr. Kent said earlier, there are certain conditions under which all the wrong conditions will come, and we won't be able to put people in front of that, regardless of getting an early detection from a camera. However, for the most part, this is helping to save those lives because it gives us an early opportunity to know what's out there and what's in its way and get the right assets out there quickly.
I appreciate that. Lots of years of worrying in our family. So appreciate all you do. And and appreciate the conversation. I don't know.
One point, Chair.
Yes, please.
Yeah. And again, thank Casey and her folks, because they run towards fires and I don't. So I'll put that on the record. What it unfortunately can do also is after action reports. We had one where a firefighter was pulled out of a fire over in the Numbers area a few years ago so they could understand what happened. Luckily, that person wasn't injured, but it was a close call. We deal with, there was a fatality in the Los Angeles forest this last summer. And you could just unfortunately see the fire behavior. As Casey said, unfortunately, it was one of those things where you don't want to, but it started. And so I think by having this after action video, unfortunately, if there's situations where people are injured or lose their lives or it was a close call, it allows folks to go back and understand what happened so we can try to not have it happen again. So thank you again.
Thank you very much. I don't think I see any additional questions from the committee. So with that, we will go to testimony in support of Senate Bill 180. And again, we are limiting all testifiers to 2 minutes. And broadcasting, is there anyone online that would like to support Senate Bill 180?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support of SB 180, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 092, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Tiffany East, Tiffany Good afternoon, Chair Dondero Loop, Vice Chair Orenshaw, and members of the Senate Committee on Government Affairs. For the record, my name is Tiffany East, and I'm the chairwoman of the Nevada Board of Wildlife Commissioners. The Legislative Committee of the Wildlife Commission supports SB 180. The full commission will take its vote later this week on this and other bills. As you've just heard, just in the last few years, wildfires have destroyed hundreds of thousands of acres of habitat for Nevada's wildlife, habitat they depend on for their summer and winter ranges. We agree that early detection will enable first responders to assess the situation, get resources on the ground quicker, especially in some of our tough-to-access rural areas, and limit the loss of habitat. Just this last week, the Utah Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands announced the addition of camera detection to assist with wildfire mitigation efforts. We encourage you to support SB 180. Thank you for your consideration and time to this very important bill.
Thank you very much. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 732, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Kyle Davis, Kyle Davis. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Kyle Davis, and I appear today on behalf of the Coalition for Nevada's Wildlife. We had the opportunity to have a presentation by Dr. Kent a few weeks ago at our board meeting, and was really appreciated the opportunity to learn more about this technology. As you heard in the presentation, wildfire has really ravaged Nevada's landscapes. In Nevada, we have lost over 9 million acres in the last 2 decades. And a lot of times when these wildfires burn on our landscape, our native sagebrush habitat comes back with invasive species like cheatgrass. And the problem for that is not what our native wildlife need. And that's part of the reason that we see challenging situations for our species like sage-grouse and mule deer. The number one thing that we can do to benefit wildlife in our state is to control these wildfires and stop the loss of habitat. Our organization is in strong support of this bill because anything that we can do to detect wildfires earlier is going to help us maintain wildlife habitat and help us maintain healthy wildlife populations. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next caller, please.
We are currently taking testimony in support of SB 180. To testify in support, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. If you recently just joined us, we are currently in support of SB 180. To testify in support, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 249, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 249, please press star 6 now to unmute yourself. Thank you. You may begin.
My name is Ernie Adler, and I represent IBW 1245. And the IBW 1245 are the electrical workers for NV Energy, and they strongly support this bill. This is a very good bill in terms of prevention of fires and fire dangers. In addition, currently, if we have a fire and there is a response by NV Energy employees, they run the real risk of serious injury or even death, which did happen in California. So we strongly support this measure.
Thank you. Next caller, please.
Chair, you have no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you very much. Then we will hear testimony in opposition.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition of SB 180, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, to testify in opposition of SB 180, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much. And finally, before we go to phone testimony in neutral, it is my understanding Casey, the state forester and fire warden, would like to present some neutral testimony via video. So go ahead when you're ready, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon again, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Again, for the record, Casey, State Forester Fire Warden for the Nevada Division of Forestry. Thank you for having me here today to testify in neutral on Senate Bill 180. Wildfire prevention is critical for the protection of life and property and of Nevada's natural resources. In 2020, Nevada saw an increase in overall fire starts across the state with a steep increase in human-caused ignitions. 68% of wildfire starts were human-caused, amounting to 76% of the total acres burned in Nevada. Prior to 2020, the 5-year average for human-caused starts was 52%, amounting to 28% of the total acres burned in Nevada. To ensure this increased trend does not continue, interagency wildfire prevention campaigns are critical to educate the public on current conditions, risks, and activities that cause wildland fires in Nevada. In addition, early aggressive initial attack is critical to keeping wildfires small, which reduces the devastating effects to life, property, and ecosystems. In 2020, interagency partners achieved a higher initial attack success rate at 97% overall compared to a historical average of 95%. This was largely due to ensuring we collectively had the contracts, equipment, staffing, and training to be properly prepared for the potential threats of the season. In 2020, this included an emergency contract with Bridger Aerospace Scoopers to enable highly effective initial attack, early and consistent interagency planning, and the installation of additional early detection devices such as fire cameras, as discussed earlier by Mr. Kent. Fire cameras are used by all 5 of Nevada's interagency wildland fire dispatch centers and by state, federal, and local government agency personnel for early detection, identifying exact fire locations, and determining appropriate response based on fire size and acceptability. Having public access to camera viewing allows many more eyes for early detection than agencies have alone and than have previously used than other previously used detection methods. Thank you again for having me here today.
Thank you very much. And broadcasting, is there anyone else who would like to testify in neutral, please?
Thank you, Chair. To testify neutral on SB 180, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. If you recently just joined us and you would like to testify neutral on SB 180, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers neutral at this time.
Thank you very much. So with that, I will invite Senator Sievers-Gansert back. If you have anything you would like your final remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Senator Heidi Sievers-Gansert. I want to thank you for hearing this bill today. I would appreciate your consideration of support. So thank you again.
Thank you very much for presenting this bill. We know it's an important topic. I will now close the hearing on Senate Bill 180. And we will now move on to our period of public comment. We're going to wait just a minute to give our members of the public a chance to call in. And please remember during that public comment period that we invite members of the public to express their views regarding any matters with the purview of the committee except the bills we just heard. So the bill hearings have been closed, and so we're no longer taking that verbal testimony, but we would like to hear other comments about other things that come before government affairs. Please remember to clearly state and spell your name and limit your comments to 2 minutes. And broadcasting, is there anybody in the queue?
Thank you, Chair. To speak in public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 490, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Cyrus Hojjati, Cyrus Hojjaty. I just think that it's pretty awesome to see that we are making steps approach to urban planning. I think that the urban planning is the #1 concern I have living in Las Vegas. The reason why I moved there is to provide alternatives and new projects. The fact is that the area is very car dependent. And the worst part is most of our housing units are very close together. Las Vegas area is the 5th densest urban area in the country behind New York, surprisingly, and yet other nearby areas are far less car dependent and transit oriented. I object to this car dependent land use segregated, which is heavily infested with codes and regulations. However, even though I do believe we need more pedestrian-friendly, transit-oriented, and mixed-use development, I don't believe that certain organizations like Smart Growth are the solution. I believe they're doing a lot of things wrong as well. So what we need to do is we need to preserve the vast amounts, the high rate of single-family home ownership, keep free-flowing traffic, but provide real alternatives of getting around. It is certainly one of the largest concerns I have living here, and I really think we need to obviously reduce regulations and encourage people to build something otherwise. So many of our problems we have around the world are as a result of our horrible urban planning. We are the richest society in the history of the world, and it is disgusting the kinds of cities and public spaces we really, really build. So I urge you all to wake up and realize that these housing tracts, strip malls, vast parking lots, large collector roads, all this is devastating, and we really need to preserve some of the benefits, but we need to create other alternatives. This is the largest concern I have living in Las Vegas, and I think we need to return to some of the urban planning principles that we did in the 1920s and prior. I think historic Carson City has a lot of things we can learn of. My question is, why did we ever change this system so much in the first place? Think about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next caller.
Chair, you have no more callers to speak in public comment at this time.
Thank you very much. Well, hearing no more public comment, that concludes our meeting today. Our next meeting will be Monday, March 22nd at 3:30. We won't have a meeting on Friday, but that will be ending shortly because we will need that time. So with that, thank you, committee members. Thank you to all who testified and hung with us, and the meeting is adjourned.